The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, good morning, everybody. We are going to get started in about a minute or so as people join. So please stand by and we'll start in about a minute. Thank you.
What?
It's good when you have kids going to school from home. All right, Ryan, when we get started, it's about 2 minutes after. If some folks join, that's okay. Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Morio. I'm one of the principals of Cornerstone.IT. Thanks for joining this webinar this morning. I think it's a timely topic, especially around the world that we're living in now, that folks working from home, and talking about remote access, work from home, and specifically around Windows Virtual Desktop running in Azure with Citrix's cloud infrastructure supporting that. Today we have with us Ryan Fries. I'm going to put on the next slide there. Today we have with us Ryan Fries. He is a technology consultant with Ingram Micro. It's our distributor. He works very, very closely with Citrix. So anytime we do Citrix presentations or road shows, we've been on some road shows together, Ryan and I, around Citrix and Windows Virtual Desktop. Ryan is our go-to guy. The agenda for today, we're really going to talk about, well, I'll do a little plug for Cornerstone up front of the presentation, and then we'll get into, we've got some polling questions. Polling questions are going to ask, basically, what are you guys doing today around work from home, remote access, and what you're looking to do possibly next year, 2021. Give an overview of Windows Virtual Desktop running in Azure. It's very interesting because it's a multi-tenant version of Windows, so or multi-session, I should say, version of Windows, kind of like your classic remote desktop services. But it's a multi-session version of actually the Windows 10 operating system. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how Citrix adds on to that and sort of the long relationship that Citrix and Microsoft have. And then we're going to show a little bit of a tool, third-party tool that we like a lot. It's kind of a boot from thumb drive utility that allows IT directors, managers to send out these boot from thumb drives that allow people to connect automatically and securely. And then we'll give a demonstration of Windows Virtual Desktop and the Citrix Cloud. Just a quick pitch on Cornerstone. I recognize a lot of names here, but for those of you who don't know Cornerstone, we've been doing legal technology for 18 years now. I know I look like I'm 22, but we've been doing it for a long time. So we've got the experience. We do everything from solution design. We use best practices that we've developed ourselves, as well as best practices from the vendors, Microsoft, Citrix, put that all together and integrate it all. And then we also provide ongoing support and managed services, monitoring, maintenance, security services. And those are some of our awards and partnerships on the bottom of that. This is an ILTA sponsored event, so we're always proud to talk about our relationship with ILTA, which has been for 18 years as well. And then I think one more plug on Cornerstone, next slide. We've been...
We have a poll question here.
Oh, yeah, great, sorry. Why don't we ask a poll question really, what are you guys doing today? So what's your firm's work from home remote access today? Check all that apply. Do you currently use Citrix? You may have Citrix and a virtual private network, whether it's always on VPN or SonicWall or Cisco, or you may be a Verizon, VMware Horizon customer, or use remote desktop, or you might remote into your PCs under your desk. So if you guys could just select all that apply, that would be super.
So far, I see a few answers for VPN, a couple for Citrix. Surprisingly, none for remote PC, log me in type solution, or RDS yet. Give it another minute or so.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how some firms have evolved. I know of a fairly large firm in New York, 2,000 users, and they do remote to their PC under their desk, which I was very surprised to hear. They do have security, two-factor authentication, but I've traditionally thought about the remote PC as a smaller firm solution, but and I suspect the quick onset of the pandemic really required a lot of firms to do whatever they could as quickly as they could. So, okay. What do you have there? I don't see the polling answers, Ryan.
About shows that are around 66% Citrix and 66% VPN. So I'm not sure how that works because that's more than 100%. But it looks like about half VPN, half Citrix joining us today.
All right, good. And I will note, please feel free to put any questions or chats. There's a question tab, there's a chat tab. I'll monitor both of those as Ryan's doing most of the presentation. The second poll question, does it come up now? It's really, what are you guys considering for next year? Is Citrix and VPN really working for you, and that's fine, and you guys are going to stick with that? Are you considering Windows Virtual Desktop in Azure? Are you looking at something other, or you're going to stay with what you have? Just kind of help us understand what you guys are interested in, so we could talk about those directly.
A lot of people staying where they are, so it looks like so far.
Okay, all right, that's fine. And you know, this session is supposed to be informative. You know, so certainly pick our brains. If there's something that you're interested in specifically, put it in the chat or the questions tabs. We're very excited about the being able to run a Windows Virtual Desktop. There's a lot of firms that are moving their resources to the cloud, whether it's in Azure or in Office 365 or a hosted document management system. So the next step, as we see it behind that, is putting your desktop in the cloud, and especially in the world that we live in today. Okay, I think I got one more slide, and then I'll hand it over to you, Ryan.
Yep, and we have a comment more than a question from Luther. You need checkboxes on this poll. I completely agree. Unfortunately, GoToWebinar doesn't give us checkboxes. It only gives us radio options. So we had to do with what we had, but we appreciate the feedback for sure. But I'm guessing you have a couple of plans in the future, keeping some of what you have and maybe adding a couple of things, but we definitely appreciate the feedback.
Okay, and I didn't see that chat, Ryan, so if that was directly to you, then I didn't see it. Okay, so I think, again, one more slide, and then I'll hand it over to you, Ryan. Yeah, just Cornerstone, actually, when we started the company, my brother and I, 18 years ago, we wanted to have a better work-life balance. So although we've got offices in New York and LA and Philly and DC, a majority of our engineers and staff work remotely. We have engineers across the United States, and our network operations center, the Cornerstone employee staff network operations center, is actually in the Philippines. So we're US and I would say worldwide, but I'll just say US and in the Philippines, and a majority of us work remotely, whether it's a laptop, VPN, or Citrix. We have a mix of different technologies, and so we've been work from anywhere from the beginning. So we understand the technology behind it, the security requirements, how to support that. And then we spend a lot of time, we're not going to get into it on this call, around employee engagement, making sure that our video's on on all our calls, internal, external, making sure that we have regular communications with the whole company. So that we've done a number of things over the years to keep employees engaged while they're working remotely. That's probably a separate topic. So with that, I will hand it over to the very capable Mr. Ryan Fries.
Yep, thanks, Jim. So hello, everyone. Again, my name is Ryan Fries. I work for a large technology distributor, Ingram Micro, but I specialize in Citrix. I've been doing Citrix for the last 5 years. I used to work for Citrix in the past, doing consulting services, sales engineering, really, you name it. So this topic definitely sits close to my heart, and I really wanted to kick off this conversation to talk about the long-standing partnership of Citrix and Microsoft. And if you can't tell, Citrix just recently updated their logo, so you can see the new logo there. I'm curious what all of you think of it. Definitely different than what it was before. But really, when we talk about Citrix and Microsoft, back in July, they made a public announcement that they're even more aligned than before to try to aid customers with that transition over to cloud. And for example, you can see a few bullet points here, but Citrix was actually the only vendor that provided day one support for Windows Virtual Desktop. And really, this partnership between Citrix and Microsoft, it continues to challenge the standard for VDI, for quality of service with VDI. And there's really no question that Microsoft will continue to enhance their various RDP type offerings, such as Windows Virtual Desktop, which we'll get into within the next slide or two of what that is. But then Citrix tends to always come in and say, hey, Microsoft, this is a great update, but let us come in and enhance it for your customers. And that's really how the partnership has been working for the last decade or so. So let's get a little bit and talk about why this matters to all of you. And the first reason is Windows Virtual Desktop. So I would imagine by now, all of you have at least heard of Windows Virtual Desktop, even though you may not be at that point of testing it out yet, because the cloud journey is going to be a fairly long one. But I want to do a quick recap of what that is. And Jim kind of hinted at this earlier, but Windows Virtual Desktop, it's the very first multi-session desktop operating system available on the market. Basically, what Microsoft did is they took their RDS technology, which was traditionally built for a server operating system like a 2008 or 2012 R2, and made it available on a desktop operating system like a Windows 10 or Windows 7 desktop. The reason why this should matter to all of you is that in the past, if you've ever used RDS or Citrix, they're great technologies, but there's often issues with application compatibility on a server operating system. For example, if you've ever used an application like an AutoCAD, that application was designed and engineered to work and install on a desktop operating system, not a 2012 or 2016. So in that case, when we ran into those issues, we would have to deploy a traditional virtual desktop. The problem with that is they're a one-to-one relationship, meaning once I log into my virtual desktop via Citrix or whatever technology you prefer, that desktop is mine. I'm hogging all of that CPU, I'm hogging all of that RAM and that storage. And once another user connects into it, they're getting another virtual desktop. So we can't share that at all. Whereas with a multi-session desktop, we could potentially get 10, 15, 20 users onto a single desktop operating system, which if you think about it from an IT management perspective, it's a lot easier to manage a smaller number of desktops versus a huge pool. And to paint a better picture, so I mentioned before I did Citrix consulting services back when I worked for Citrix years ago, and the consulting team would even go into customer sites even after they purchase Zen Desktop as an example and recommend virtual apps, Zen app. And the reason was because multi-session is just, again, it's that much easier to manage. It's a more scalable solution. But the contention point always came from application compatibility standpoint. Are your applications compatible with the server OS? Do they play well with it? Do they work well with each other? So that's always became like the conversation we had to have with the customer when it came to selecting virtual apps versus virtual desktop. So if we think about it from a use case perspective, let's say we have a 200 user firm, that's 200 desktops we would have to manage traditionally versus maybe 15 to 20 desktops if we were to use a multi-session desktop. And Windows Virtual Desktop is just that, right? So from a management perspective, there's just huge value that Windows Virtual Desktop brings to the table when it comes to virtualization. So the only caveat to this, to Windows Virtual Desktop, is it's only available in Microsoft Azure. Also, it's not a standalone product that you can just purchase. It's an entitlement with these typical Microsoft SKUs. So chances are most of you have one of these level of license agreements with Microsoft, either M365 E3 Plus, Windows E3, E5, F1. So you're probably entitled to Windows Virtual Desktop today, but if you're not, that's how you get the entitlement for that. And the way, of course, Microsoft.
Yeah,
sure.
that's a whole nother session on licensing. I know we did one for ILTA a few months ago, but that's very important that you look closely at what O365 or M365 licenses you have. In many cases, you have probably more than you're aware of, but you do need certain SKUs to get the virtual desktop license.
Yep, and from a Windows Virtual Desktop perspective, you are still technically paying for it because you're paying for the consumption cost of running Windows Virtual Desktop in Azure. But that consumption cost that comes with it also includes the typical other Microsoft licensing that you would need for virtualization. Like if you ever use virtual desktops in the past, you need a VDI license. If you're using virtual apps, you need a RDS license. So that's wrapped into that consumption cost for Windows Virtual Desktop. The only other thing I want to note here, so it's the last bullet, is if you're still leveraging Windows 7 today in your organization, you're probably paying for extended security updates. So you still get those security patches, updates from Microsoft. Come the following year, that cost for those extended security updates are going to double. And then year 3, that'll double again. And then after that 3rd year, Microsoft is going to get rid of all of their extended security updates. However, if you move your Windows 7 workloads over to Azure, currently Microsoft is giving that extended security updates for free. So that's just something to know. It's a little different than Windows Virtual Desktop, but it is Windows 7 in Azure. So that really brings us to why Citrix and Windows Virtual Desktop. I'll get to product specifics later on in today's presentation, but the biggest reason is really that Citrix and Microsoft, again, they publicly announced that they have joined forces to really try and simplify cloud transformation and the speed of adoption to move to some sort of digital workspace or virtual desktop. And Citrix has so many advantages for customers looking to leverage cloud services in Azure. So I often say the question shouldn't be why Citrix or Windows Virtual Desktop. Like, why would I need Citrix if I'm using Windows Virtual Desktop? But the question should be like, why wouldn't you want to enhance your environment by pairing these two solutions together to give your end users the most optimal user experience possible, because these two vendors are working so closely together? So let's get into some of those details I was mentioning around how Citrix improves Windows Virtual Desktop. And I'm a big fan of this slide. We like to call this slide the sunrise slide because it kind of looks like a sunrise with a lot of features behind it. But really, this is a great representation of just a handful of the value adds that Citrix adds on top of that Windows Virtual Desktop workload. So oftentimes I have customers ask me all the time, again, why do I need Citrix if I have Windows Virtual Desktop? And I think this slide speaks volumes as to why. The story should never be, hey, I only need this or this. It should be, again, they work well together, and Citrix provides all these value adds to give that truly optimal end user experience. So rather than go through these features now, I broke it up into multiple slides. Let's build this out. And the first one here, so it's all about simplified and flexible management. So one of the biggest value adds Citrix brings to the table is being able to manage hybrid cloud deployments. So if you think about it, if you were to have ever moved to Azure Cloud Services or AWS, whatever the cloud vendor you're preferring to move to, you're probably going to have some resources that live on premise while only a handful of resources live in the cloud. You're not going to move everything all at once. And Citrix has a great story for that, where you can manage both those on-prem workloads as well as those cloud workloads from the same management console. It's one of the only vendors that can, again, it can manage both and collectively together. They also have great image management technology that makes provisioning Windows Virtual Desktop workloads across various resources a lot easier. So machine creation services, it's a great technology which basically takes a snapshot of an existing image so you can provision multiple Windows Virtual Desktop sessions across your various workloads. And then from an application layering perspective, Citrix has this great technology which simplifies the IT administrator's responsibility for managing, again, the WVD workloads. Essentially what it does is it separates certain applications, so think of like the Microsoft Productivity Suite, and it puts that into a flexible layer so IT admins can package that together and deploy the layers across individual components. And really this just helps with deploying the actual environment. So next we have security. So Citrix brings quite a bit of, one more here. Quite a bit of security benefits to Windows Virtual Desktop. For example, it has application protection policies, which protects against those devices, typically like a personal device that may be infected with, let's say, a keylog or a screen scraper malware, and it'll protect against those type of compromised devices from getting sensitive information. For example, if somebody connected with a device that they have a keylogger installed on it, and they're running via Citrix session that has these application protection policies, all that keylogger malware is going to capture is a bunch of jumbled characters. It won't actually get the actual keystrokes that the user is using. Similar with a screen scraper malware, if there's a malware that's on the endpoint device that's just constantly taking screenshots, it's just going to get gray boxes of the Citrix session. So some great enhancements with security features. Citrix also has security analytics, and I'll actually be showing this as a part of the demo, but the security analytics is extremely powerful. It gives users a user risk score based on how they work within the session. So for example, if I'm connecting from South Florida, which is where I am right now, and an hour later I'm connecting from somewhere in Southeast Asia, the security analytics can pick up on that. It's going to kick the user out of their session and send a note to somebody from IT. Same with data. So if all of a sudden I'm downloading 500 megs or a gig worth of data, well, that's probably not right. So let's go ahead and again, kick the user out and send a notification to IT that there's some risky behavior. Or maybe we'll, instead of doing that, we'll do like a session recording and start recording the user session. And then lastly, secure browser, really cool technology. It's essentially a hosted browser by Citrix. If you ever need to give access to websites that you may not typically want to give users access to if they're on the corporate network, because since this is a hosted browser, if for whatever reason the user does something that they shouldn't and they accidentally download a malware or a virus, we don't care because it's on a browser that's not on the network, it's hosted by Citrix, and as soon as the user logs off, that session is going to be completely wiped. So some powerful technology there.
Hey Ryan, is that also sold as a separate product? We get a lot of questions about this when we present about the secure browser, for just the reason that you said. Firms are okay with allowing attorneys to go to Facebook as long as it's not on their network. So is that sold as a separate product, or is that something that you have to get as part of a bundle?
Yeah, so it's only available right now as a part of a bundle, but I'm sure if there's enough demand from Citrix, that's going to change in the future. But we definitely see a lot of interest from customers leveraging the secure browser solution.
Okay. Yeah, and to your point above that with the analytics, the security, that'll be a good part of the demo. That's I think very interesting technology that Citrix is adding.
Yep, absolutely. So let's move to number 3. Again, I'll build out the slide here. So Citrix can also help with optimizing performance, which is all about helping reduce the cost of Azure workloads. So if you haven't tested Azure yet, one of the largest costs associated with Azure is actual consumption, the usage. So you pay for what you use. By the way, just a little plug. So I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, Microsoft recently announced that they're offering up to $3,000 of Azure credit for doing a POC in Azure. It's either 3,000 or 90 days, whichever comes first. So definitely recommend taking a look at Azure. Test it out. It's going to be free because they're running this promo right now. But again, when it comes to Azure, typically the largest cost comes from the actual usage of the workloads in Azure. So if we take, for example, the first bullet point there, workspace environment management, this is all about, it's a tool all about optimizing performance and scalability of Windows Virtual Desktop workloads by optimizing things like the CPU, the RAM, the IOPS, meaning you could potentially have more users on a single Windows Virtual Desktop session because we're optimizing all of those resources. So think about if we can have an additional 2 users per desktop. That might mean for me as an organization, I need now less desktops in my Azure environment. So now inherently I'm spending less in cost because I have more scalability out of what I already have. Auto scale, so that's the next one there. That's another great technology to help keep costs low. So auto scale will power on and off machine based on time of day, based on workload utilization. It also helps with preventing the over provisioning of resources that again could result in those additional costs during those idle times. And then lastly, Citrix has some great analytics. I talked about the security analytics, but it also collects data across all of the Citrix offerings and provides actionable insights, enabling administrators to proactively handle user and application security threats, improve application performance, user performance, and just do continuous operations. So there's some great features when it comes to the analytics.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Some of these capabilities of auto scaling, shutting down resources, finding when you're using resources too much, or being able to fine tune it, actually could pay for itself for the cloud, the Citrix cloud subscription, just in the savings that firms are getting in lowering their Azure usage. So it's a good sort of a argument for when people say, well, why do I need to spend a little bit more? Some of these tools actually end up saving you on your cost of your Azure.
Yep, completely agree. Great point. so a couple other things to note. So robust monitoring, I know we talked about analytics, but I know a handful of you are already Citrix customers, so I'm sure you're very familiar with Citrix Director. This is included with any virtual app or desktop offering, even in the cloud. And essentially, this is Citrix's monitoring solution that provides views of things like capacity trends, so the operating system usage. It can show you failed session launches, reboot warnings. This is where most IT help desk would go into to troubleshoot sessions, so log users off, shadow users accounts, things of that nature. And Citrix session recording, really, really cool feature where we can start recording on-screen activity of any Citrix session for retrieval and playback to aid with troubleshooting that session. You can also create something called a trigger within Citrix, which will record the session automatically if a flag is alerted. So let's say we say if somebody's downloading more than 300 megs, let's start a session recording so we can see what they're doing during that time. And IT can go back and watch that video and see what the user's doing within their Citrix session. So great from a security standpoint. And then last thing I want to talk about here is one of the key components of Citrix is their HDX technology. So this has been the backbone, the foundation of Citrix virtual apps and desktops for years. And it's really what provides the high definition user experience within a Citrix session. So this is whenever you heard like, should I use RDS or Citrix? Citrix took the RDS protocol and made it better. It made it better for graphical applications, for supporting different peripheral devices, for utilizing voice, video, as well as similar solutions. So, for example, if you wanted to use Microsoft Teams in Windows Virtual Desktop today, it didn't work natively until about 2 weeks ago, and it only works if you're connecting to Windows Virtual Desktop from a Windows device. So if you're planning on using any sort of Mac or Linux device to connect to Windows Virtual Desktop, you have to use Citrix to get that Teams or Skype for Business optimization pack in order to get
as people rely more and more on Teams and Zoom, new desktop applications are going to work less or not as well as if you were running it locally. So you do need to have some features and capabilities added to your virtual desktop so that Teams and GoToMeeting and Zoom work better than what they would do natively on a virtual desktop. Back to you, Ryan.
Yep. So just looking at a comment, I agree, Vito. He's saying that it seems like he's saying Teams or GoToMeeting or Skype is very problematic with Dell-wise terminals. Yeah, I've seen that in the past as well. So yeah, again, Citrix has their Teams Skype for Business optimization pack, which tends to eliminate that. But it definitely gets tricky when your endpoint's not a Windows-based endpoint and you're trying to use Microsoft natively. So one more thing to mention here, so Citrix SD-WAN, it's another great value-add solution. It's a separate networking solution, which is all about providing network redundancy and improved network performance from one location to another. So for example, if you have a primary location and multiple offsite locations, you usually have an MPLS network that goes between those different locations, as well as maybe like an LTE line. SD-WAN can virtually bind all of those together, combine the throughput, and even fail over those network lines to ensure that users get the best performance possible from one location to another. Also has built-in APIs for Office 365, so it just knows how to optimize that Microsoft traffic to send you directly to Microsoft's global network to improve Office 365 network performance. So if you've ever used Outlook with Office 365 and it takes a while to search for an email or it takes a while to open up an Excel spreadsheet, those are typically signs of network issues within your Office 365 environment. And really, I've had this conversation all the time. Sometimes a lot of customers just think, oh, it's Microsoft's network that's doing this. But if your network's not architected correctly to reach Microsoft's network, we can run into the issue. All right, so changing gears a little bit. So now let's talk about a little bit of the endpoint. So really, the question here is, what are users going to use now to connect to their company's virtual environment, whether that be a virtual desktop or a virtual application? And honestly, so Citrix and Microsoft, they really do a great job that it's still secure to connect from a personal device. And it's definitely not uncommon to see organizations that just have a BYOD policy and users will just connect from their own devices at home. But there's often times where it makes sense to bring in another solution that provides additional management as well as security capabilities. And that's where we really want to highlight Igel as one of those endpoint solutions. So if you've never heard of Igel, really cool solution. I'll actually show what that looks like as a part of the demo. Really, at the end of the day, it's a purpose-built operating system to connect users to cloud and virtual environments in a secure and in a secure way that's a read-only device. So if I'm plugging in Igel device at home, that device is read-only. So if I did anything, went to a website I shouldn't have, and I potentially tried to install something on that device, it's just not possible because that device can't be written to. And also it's easy to manage because they have a unified management console, a single console to manage all the Igel devices within it. Again, this will make more sense as I show it. So again, I don't want to go into too much detail here, but I do want to mention to try and paint a better picture. So Igel is a thin client device, and it can either convert an older device into an Igel thin client. So if you have any devices that are just you're going to get rid of because they're older, they're a little slower, you could actually install the Igel operating system on top of that, convert it into an Igel thin client, and manage it from the unified management console. So yeah, that's one of their amazing solutions. Comment, Jim?
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, probably the easiest use case there is you've got Windows 7 machines that are old and you don't want to upgrade. You could just put the Igel iOS on top of that and get rid of the Windows 7 vulnerability because you don't have security patches there. So that's probably the easiest use case is old Windows 7 machine that you'd like to repurpose, but you don't want to rebuild, create a new Windows 10 image and all the work that's involved in maintaining it. Just boot off of one of these UD pockets or install the OS on that device, and you don't have to worry about Windows 7 anymore.
Yep. And so they also have another really cool device. So it's called a UD Pocket. So prior to COVID, prior to coronavirus, UD Pocket was often a solution used for POCs, for demonstrations, but because everyone's working remotely now, essentially what it is, it's a little thumb drive. I'll show it on my webcam here. So hopefully everyone can see it. So this is my Microsoft Surface. I don't know if anyone can see right here on the side, there's a little thumb drive plugged into this. This is the Igel UD Pocket. Essentially what I can do as a user, I plug this into my device at home, I boot from this device, and this device is going to boot into an Igel client. So I'm temporarily converting my device into an Igel client during the workday, and I can launch my Citrix session, my VMware, my Microsoft session, you name it, from this device during my workday. As soon as I'm done with my workday, I can unplug it and I can use my device like normal. So it's a really cool solution for those at-home workers. And I'll show how we can push settings and all that cool stuff to it during the demo. And of course, last but not least, Igel does have traditional hardware like you would typically find with HP or Dell thin clients for the office space use case. So I really just want to emphasize again, the whole purpose of Igel is to simplify connectivity for the end user to their virtual desktop or applications. It's just to make the endpoint easier. That's where their I guess, business was based out of, or it was created from.
I think there's a link. We're going to send the deck out to all you folks who are attending. There's a link in the deck to this video. It's a video on Cornerstone's website as well, which kind of walks you through the whole setup of and the use of a UD Pocket. So that's if you want a little bit more about it, Ryan's going to do a little bit of a demo right now. But if you want a little bit more information about UD Pocket, just click on the link that's in the attachment, or go to Cornerstone's website and just search for UD Pocket demo, and you can see a good video.
Awesome. So let's look at a quick demo. And hopefully it behaves well. So I showed the Igel on my Surface device, but for ease of showing, I have an Igel client just running as a virtual machine because it's easier to demonstrate. So this is a bare bone Igel client. I have 0 settings configured to this. So if we paint a picture here, let's say I'm a lawyer working from home because of what's been happening in this crazy world. I get shipped an Igel client or a UD Pocket and I boot from it. This is what I'm going to see when I first log in. So from here, my organization can either pre-configure my Igel client for me, in which case I would have my background change. I would see my Citrix icon. If I'm using Citrix, maybe a web browser. In Igel's case, they provide a Firefox browser, so that would be embedded here. Or we can set up something within the organization called an Igel Cloud Gateway. So essentially what this is it's a gateway that sits in the organization's DMZ that clients that are off the network can register with. So in this case, I'm a lawyer. My organization gave me a couple of instructions on how to register with Igel. So I'm going to first type in my email address here. From here, it's asking for my department. So I'll type in this case, I have an education one set up. So I'll type in education, and then I type in the password that was provided to me. So once I hit login, you'll see Igel Cloud Gateway connection is ready. So that's good to go. So we'll finish. And hopefully this doesn't take too long. So I'm in South Florida. This is connecting to a gateway that's all the way in Buffalo, New York. So pretty far. We can even see on the bottom right now, it's trying to create my custom desktop. So it's creating a new partition. In a second, downloading a wallpaper for me. And again, this is connecting to Buffalo from Florida, so might take a second. And yeah, there we go. So that was actually pretty fast, considering we're going from southeast to northeast. And now you can see I have my Citrix icon available to me. Again, if I had other settings, like if I pre-configured a policy to give me a Firefox browser, I would see that here as well. But in this case, let's go ahead. I'm going to log into my Citrix account here. Let's see, why didn't it like that password? Let's try that one more time. And try that one last time. I don't know if I'm that cap log on. Yes. If it doesn't like it, it is not liking my password for some reason. You know what it is? It disconnected me from my network. So let me reboot that, and we'll try this again in a second so I can log into Citrix so I can show all of you how the virtual apps and desktops would look within the Igel session itself. In the meantime, let's switch over to the Citrix Cloud Admin Console so we can all see what that looks like. So Citrix Cloud, the admin console is pretty straightforward, but you'll see there's a lot of various services available to me. So Citrix, similar to Azure, you can subscribe to individual services. So if you want a service for analytics, you would see that under My Services if you're subscribed. If you're not subscribed, you would see it under Available Services. So you can see I have virtual apps and desktops here. I have content collaboration, which used to be called ShareFile. We have our secure browser service here. So all of those are available to me. We also have other notifications on the top here, things like tickets. We have our domains as well as resource locations. I always like to highlight resource locations because I mentioned the hybrid multi-cloud scenario earlier on today's presentation, how most of us will have some sort of desktop or application server that lives on premise as well as the cloud as we're testing out the cloud. And here's where we can see all of those different locations where our workloads live. So we have a lot because we test out a lot here. And you can see we have a Business Transformation Center, Citrix demo resource location. So this one's in Buffalo. We have one in Microsoft Azure, another one here in Microsoft Azure. We can see the state of our cloud connector, which is what establishes that connection over to those various resource locations. So amber means it's only detecting one. So it shows one's down and one is up and running. Red would mean it's not detecting any. And then of course, if it's just gray, we're good to go. That means it's seeing two cloud connectors in that resource location. So that's where we can see all the areas we have resources in. Of course, we can specify our domains if we want to authenticate via Azure Active Directory or traditional on-premise Active Directory. You can create that here. Let's go into the virtual apps and desktops service here so we can take a look at that. And for those of you who have used Citrix in the past, you'll notice some of this is familiar. First thing it does here, if you're brand new with Citrix and you haven't set up anything, it gives you step-by-step instructions of how to set up Citrix Cloud with your resource location, as well as some video tutorials. So it makes it a pretty straightforward process. I remember I was able to do it within like 30 minutes because Citrix even manages that cloud connector for you as soon as you log in with your Citrix admin credentials. But once that's all set up and you have your resource locations, you still have Studio, which is your management console for Citrix, just like you would with a traditional on-prem deployment, where you have machine catalogs as well as delivery groups. So for those who aren't as familiar with Citrix, your machine catalog is essentially your grouping of machine based on operating system. So if I had a Windows 10 versus 2016, I would have two different machine catalogs based on that operating system. And then your delivery groups is how you actually assign applications and desktops based on users and user groups within the organization. So for example, a lawyer, the desktop and the application I have access to is going to be very different than what somebody from the marketing department or the accounting department would have access to. So you'd have a delivery group for each of those different departments within the organization. And of course, they do have monitoring built into this as well. So you can see active sessions that are being connected. So I can go into those sessions, see exactly who's connecting into that. So you can see one of my connections here. You can see the endpoint IP, what's connecting to, as well as where I'm connecting from. So all of that is available here. Let's see if I can go to trends here, because I think this is really unique to show. So we can even check things such as session failures. We can check on logon performance, so how long it actually takes to get into the Citrix session. So as an example here, we can see one of the logons. This one took 22 seconds. And we can see exactly what made up that 22 seconds. So the profile load took 6.5 seconds. A GPO took 1.64 seconds. Authentication took half a second. So it gets very detailed into looking into the session. So if anything was to go wrong or performance wasn't optimal, we can try and investigate why that performance isn't optimal.
Yeah, great tools. You know, there's plenty of times when people say, "Hey, Citrix is slow, and my remote access is slow," and you have the now you have those tools that allow you to dig into it, get into the granularity of the login process to understand or troubleshoot what's taking long.
Yep. So that's Director. Again, this is just built into virtual apps and desktops. That's not an additional service, that's just included. The security and performance analytics that I'm showing now, this is an additional service, but has a slew of additional benefits. So the way Citrix does it, I mentioned this earlier, but they rank users based on a risk score as well as a performance score if you're using the performance analytics. So we have high, medium, and low risk users, and we can see and configure exactly what's considered a high risk user and what alerts would add to that user risk score. So for example, if I want to look at Maria's risk profile, I can see why she's getting a high risk score. So we can see right off the bat, she's connecting from a jailbroken device. She has blacklisted applications on that device. An EPA scan was failed. Back prior in the past, she tried to excessively access sensitive files, which alerted a data loss prevention alert. And you can see the system automatically started a session recording. So we can go back and view Maria's session to see exactly what she was doing with those sensitive files. We can see exactly what files she accessed, what time she did, the size of those files. So you can get very, very detailed information around how the user is behaving within their Citrix session. So some really cool
pretty
stuff.
Interesting. I think that's pretty interesting. So somebody does something that's either malicious or unusual or triggers a threat alert, and that session could automatically be recorded. So that's something if you brought to managing partner, executive director, and said, hey, I could kick off a recording when someone's doing something unusual. That's going to get the partnership's attention.
Absolutely. And this is all configurable by the IT admin as well. So if you're not as concerned with blacklisted devices, but you're extremely concerned about sensitive files or excessive downloads of data, those triggers and alerts is configured by the IT admin. So it's customizable based on your specific use case. Similar with performance analytics, so there's some great information we could get on user performance, so we can be more proactive than reactive when it comes to how users are interacting with the system. So in the past, usually when most IT teams, most Citrix admins hear about performance issues, it's from the user. That's a user calling in saying, hey, my sessions is failing to launch, it's taking me forever to download. With the performance analytics, we can be more on top of how users are interacting. So again, we have a red, amber, green user risk score. So we can look at all those users that are having a poor performance and see exactly why it's being considered a poor performance. Is it the availability? Are they having a lot of failure rates of logging into their Citrix session? Is it their responsiveness? Are they experiencing a lot of latency? Is it their logon duration? So we can get very granular with the user performance as well. So let's try this one more time. Let's see if I can log into Citrix. It looks like my connection is not failing, so that's good. So you can see that little cloud icon on the bottom right, that's showing me that I'm connected correctly. So it looks like it's working this time. So it's getting my virtual applications, and I think this environment is running in Texas. So this is fully customizable. I have a lot of applications and desktops that are published to me, so I can launch any of these. If I don't want them on my desktop and I just want them to show on my my little bar on the bottom left, I always like to call it Windows key, but I guess the Igel key, or start menu rather, that would be there. But if I wanted to launch, let's say my cloud desktop that lives in Azure, I'll just go ahead and double click that. We can set it up in a way where if we want to auto launch this, we can auto launch this as well. And as soon as this connects to my desktop, I will be accessing a typical Windows virtual desktop like I would from my own device at home. So some really powerful stuff, and really great story of how we can use Igel to connect to Citrix and how we can use Citrix to connect to a desktop that lives in Azure like Windows Virtual Desktop.
Cool.
So I will kick it back over to Jim to close us out.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. That was super helpful. Again, you guys saw some of the added capabilities around security and performance analytics, which I think is very helpful for Citrix administrators to manage their environment and also get the most out of your virtual desktop. We hit on the point earlier about the performance of Teams and Zoom. If you're going to run a virtual desktop in today's COVID world, and you're going to connect to you want to run Teams off virtual desktop, you really need to have those added capabilities. Please feel free if you got any questions. We've got a few more minutes to go. I've put in the chat. Let's see if this works. Well, it's probably going to go through safe links. On the Cornerstone website is a UD Pocket demo. So I'm not sure if that link is going to work or not, but you could try it. It's in the chat. We really think it's an interesting third-party add-on to Citrix and virtual desktops environments, having that bootable thumb drive or bootable OS to secure those endpoints. It's very, we find it's helpful, especially when you don't know what people have on their home PCs and you want to make sure that you've got a dedicated, secure connection. Like I said at the top of the call, the Windows Virtual Desktop multi-session Windows 10 in Azure, while it's still a fairly new technology, I suspect as people move their data and data centers to Microsoft Azure, they're going to want to have their desktop near their data. That's kind of the traditional design you want to have, or traditional is kind of the recommended design, I should say, best practices is have your desktop near your data. So if your data is now going up to Azure and your desktop is someplace else, you're going to have some performance issues. Put your desktop near your data up in the cloud. And then Microsoft is going to design something that works for most people, but if you really want to get all the added benefits, performance, security, you really need to add on a product like Citrix. And Citrix's cloud allows you to offload all those back-end services, the broker, the storefront, the NetScalers up to Citrix's cloud, so you don't need to have that running on-prem, configured, maintained, updated, etc. I don't see any other questions in here, and I'm happy to give you guys back in 3 minutes. I really appreciate you joining in. ILTA may or may not send a survey out. They have been doing it, but I know they've been kind of short-staffed lately. So if they do, please fill it out. Appreciate it. Any other questions, comments? There's my email address, phone number, website. I know a number of you folks. Please feel free to reach out to me. If you don't know me, I'm very available and happy to help in any way we can. Ryan Fries, thank you very, very much. Always a pleasure working with you. I appreciate your stuff. And again, if you want to see the UD Pocket demo and fine work of our Cornerstone marketing department, please feel free to click on that link. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye now.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.